Here he is from New York, that Kevin McCullough.
Welcome back. My guest is James Rosen, Newsmax White House correspondent. He's back in the Beltway and talking about what's going on at the White House every day. Scalia Rise to Greatness, by the way, the name of the book. It covers the years 1936 to 1986 in Scalia's life. But a lot of people were shocked after the death of Scalia that he and Ginsburg had such a close relationship. In fact, I remember reading a statistic by a court analyst somewhere that said that over the course of their career, in terms of the rulings that they both adjudicated on, they probably agreed close to 60% of the time on the outcomes of the cases. And when you think about how the media portrayed these two and really pitted them against one another, I find it interesting that they had as much agreement in terms of their view towards the law as they did. I know this isn't really part of the book that's currently out, but in terms of how those notes that flew back and forth, what did you reveal in terms of the foundation of where that friendship came from?
So I think, first of all, the news media in covering the Supreme Court can really only focus on a certain number of cases per year, the ones that are likeliest to generate a lot of attention,
stories, the
political significance. That's right. But so there's so many more cases that are disposed of by the Supreme Court, and unanimity is, I think, more common amongst the justices than the public generally recognizes. But in the case of Scalia and Ginsburg, certainly we have this celebrated friendship where the two of them rang in New Year's every year with their spouses. They attended the opera together. They rode elephants in India together. All this despite disagreeing sharply over most points of law, certainly the fundamental ways about how to go about constitutional and statutory interpretation. But they survived as a kind of model of civility amongst intellectual combatants. And they are everywhere. I mean, this has been enshrined in stage plays and operas. And I even just recently went looking for the phrase Scalia Ginsburg and found a pair of podcast hosts who were urging us to find the Ginsburg for your inner Scalia. But in this book, Scalia Rise to Greatness, which tells the story of the first 50 years of Antonin Scalia's life, I'm proud to say that among the many archival triumphs of this book is that I went through Ruth Bader Ginsburg's papers at the Library of Congress. Some 220 boxes of them are stored there.
Wow. And
found her papers from her tenure on the D.C. Circuit Court, one rung below the Supreme Court. And that's where she, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and Antonin Scalia, and Robert Bork, and Kenneth Starr, and Larry Silberman all served more or less at the same time, a real murderer's row of legal talent. And as I was saying, those letters, those memos, those handwritten notes and draft opinions that were flying back and forth between the chambers of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Antonin Scalia when they were appellate court judges not only show two legal geniuses squaring off over the First Amendment or whatever the issue at the time may be, it captures their wit, and it captures, too, really the birth and the blossoming of this celebrated friendship.
It's very interesting to learn that they had as much agreement as they did, particularly with how the media pitted them against each other. But there were different times. So RGB, even before she was confirmed to the Supreme Court, thought that unanimous consent by the Senate was important, and she was confirmed on nearly a unanimous level, as was Scalia. The court has changed a lot, and I'm just curious in my last 60 seconds here, James, if you have any thoughts on what the justice would perceive today's current political and particularly judiciary climate to be like.
Justice Scalia was very open in expressing dismay about what had happened to the whole process of Supreme Court nominations and confirmations. He saw what happened to his dear friend, Robert Bork, immediately after Scalia's own ascension to the Supreme Court. And he said it's happening because people have gotten wise to the fact, and they've pressured their elected representatives to do something about it, that judges and justices are writing their own policy preferences into the law by straying from the original meanings of those laws. And once they got hip to this, the public, by Scalia's account of things, was right to insist that people who would write the laws the way they want the laws written would be appointed to these tenured posts. So that's why we have the process degenerating to the point where it did, Scalia would tell you, because the judges and justices were not behaving according to their judicial oaths.
His name is James Rosen. You can see him on Newsmax reporting from the White House now. But get the book, Scalia, Rise to Greatness, 1936 to 1986, first 50 years. James, you're going to have to come back when the second volume is published and tell us all about the remaining years of his life, and we'll look forward to that.
If not before then, I hope.
I would love to. Thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Kevin. I enjoyed it.
You got it. Kevin McCullough coming right back. That Kevin Show from New York.
Ready or not, he'll be right back. That Kevin Show with Kevin McCullough.